cordially welcome you all to the session on assessment needs in the new NEP and changing standards at TechBharat 2021. TechBharat is an initiative of Lagu Udyog Bharati Karnataka and IMS Foundation and is envisioned as a platform to guide, mentor, and empower startups and SMEs. A heartfelt thanks to Government of India and Government of Karnataka for their support and encouragement. Assessments in our schooling and higher education system has primarily been testing rote memorization skills and low order thinking skills. What does the national education policy has to say about the changing standards of assessment? Will a system of adaptive assessments which identifies students who may be falling behind and work to set up personalized learning strategies for these students in consultation with parents help them to catch up and benefit in achieving the larger goals of education? How can the focus of learning assessment shift from testing only the understanding of core concepts and knowledge to also testing higher order capacities such as critical thinking, analysis, and application be made? To discuss these and further, we have an eminent panel with us today. Firstly, I would like to welcome Mr. Uma Shankar, CEO and founder of Iridio Consultancy. He's an alumnus of Faculty of Management Studies. He has varied industry experience as diverse as IT, realty, and education, and has worked for organizations like Tata Unisys, Wipro Infotech, Motorola, Manipal K-12 Education, Pearson Education, Wipgyor International, and Spectra Global. For the last decade and a half, he has focused his efforts into the K-12 space. As the founding president for Pearson Schools, he set up and acquired and operated 35 schools in India and Nepal. He advises half a dozen startups in the education space. He would be moderating the session. A heartfelt thanks to you, sir, for accepting to moderate the session, and we welcome you. I would also like to welcome the esteemed panelists we have with us today. Firstly, I would like to welcome Mr. Nirmal Singh, CEO at VBox. With over 20 years of working experience, including general management of mid to large size listed organizations, he spearheads new initiatives and international markets for VBox. Prior to VBox, he was country head for higher education business with NIIT Limited and in key leadership roles with New Horizons Incorporation for SAARC countries. We cordially welcome you to this session, sir. I would also like to welcome Dr. Sridhar G, founder at Diksha. Dr. Sridhar graduated from IIT Kharagpur with a BTech in mechanical engineering. He went on to complete his PhD in fluid mechanics from the Johns Hopkins University, USA. A strong desire to do something for the country prompted him to return to India in '98 after a 3-year stint in the US, armed with the vision of providing an academic environment that nurtured original thinking and created confident individuals with a sense of responsibility towards society. He, along with Mrs. Lalit Sridhar, founded Academic Center for Excellence, ACE. Together, they pioneered integrated coaching in Karnataka through Diksha. We are excited to have you here, sir, and we welcome you.
Thank you.
I would also like to welcome Mr. Sunil Agarwal, Head of Portfolio, Test Prep and Assessments at Pearson. Creating consumer-centric products and services and leading to its successful adoption with collaboration from cross-functional teams is his strength. He comes with a thorough understanding of test prep market, changing consumer needs, digital penetration, and government policies. A very warm welcome to you, sir. I now request Mr. Uma Shankar to take over the session and moderate it. Over to you, sir.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you, Vishu, for that wonderful introduction. Talking about who I am and what I do, like Vishu has been nice enough to say, I've been in the education business now for almost 2 decades. Varied experience in different roles, starting way back when digital classrooms were launched. I used to work for an organization called SchoolNet, and then moved on and worked with Pearson and the Manipal Group and Wipgyor High. Over the last 4 or 5 years, I've been working in the Middle East, between Bangalore and Middle East, where I've been involved in setting up schools in the Middle East and in Bangalore. I've been in Doha in Qatar as well as in the UAE, in Abu Dhabi and Alain. Worked with groups there to set up schools. And in Bangalore, working with school groups to either set up schools or advising schools on upgrading their schools, as well as in terms of structuring, finance, legal, those aspects of managing schools. So that's really what I do here. I would like to now ask Dr. Sridhar to speak a few words about himself.
Thank you, Uma. Pleasure being here as part of TechBharat, and a very interesting topic of discussion. Glad to be part of the panelists over here. As Vishu I just introduced, I'm the founder and educator with the Diksha group of institutions, but I'm more of a serendipitous entrepreneur. I'm an engineer by background, and when I was 27, 28 years old, suddenly I just felt I need to be a teacher. I need to become a teacher. So I left my mechanical engineering, left my tech jobs in the US, and returned to India to become a teacher. And that's been one of the best decisions of my life. It's lovely. It's fun being in a classroom with students and taking some tricky concepts, difficult ideas, and seeing the spark in the eye that, we figured it out. I think that's a great rush for the teacher over there, and just enjoyed myself being in the classroom as a teacher. And slowly, it's just that right people have been coming together and the vision has been growing bigger. And I think India now is at the cusp of truly bringing about a revolution in education and making a fundamental change in what we want our children to be equipped with when they graduate schools and they go on to professional courses. And really excited that I'm a part of this transformation and revolution that's happening in our country.
Thank you, Dr. Sridhar. I would like to now request Nirmal to say a few words about himself and introduce himself.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Uma. First of all, thanks, Vishu, for inviting me and welcome everyone at TechBharat. So let me give a quick introduction. I'm the founder and CEO of VBox. I come from education background, started with FITT IIT Delhi, then moved to a company called NIIT Limited, then went outside in US with a company called New Horizons, spent 5-6 years over there, came back and became the NIIT country head for higher education business. And then in 2011, we started this venture along with the co-founder of mine, Pawan. And when we started, we wanted to be more of an education company, but slowly and gradually we found that let's choose one of the components of education, that is assessment. VBox is now a 100% subsidiary of a company called People Strong HR Services, and is invested by multiple private equity fund and HDFC Holdings. My work is around higher education largely, because we work in three portfolios. One happens to be the higher education, where we conduct remote proctored assessments in India and outside India. The second is the enterprise. So we work with close to 340, 350 large enterprise customers in India and outside, where we help them hire better people using talent assessments. And last is the government, where we help government to certify. We come as a third-party certification vendor to certify candidates on skills and knowledge when they are using a third-party training vendor to train people. So that's about. I'm very excited to be this part of this, because I'm looking forward to learn from everyone, and also whatever we do at VBox, if we could let people know and they can scale their businesses.
Thank you, Nirmal. That was wonderful. Welcome again on this panel. I'd like to ask Sunil to speak a few words and talk about himself, what he does and what Pearson does. Over to you, Sunil.
Thanks, Uma. First of all, thanks Vishu and TechBharat for inviting me. And it's a real pleasure to be with Dr. Sridhar, Uma and Nirmal, discussing as well as learning NEP and the future of assessments. About me, I work with Pearson Education, which is the world's largest learning company. And we serve the content and assessment needs of a learner from KG to PG. And this is where the entire shift is happening in the consumer preferences with respect to how he consumes content, how he takes assessments, and thereafter how he gets to the higher education and carries out his other activities. So the entire industry is going through a paradigm shift, and we are seeing how Pearson can be a part of that journey. About me, I joined education as an industry almost 2 decades ago, when the first first technical university was set up, and the engineering education in the country was in its infancy. So the period between 2001 to 2007 saw the vast rise of engineering education in the country, with enrollments increasing, and we saw that all businesses, all content businesses which served that market were going northwards. And that was the time when I worked with the leading content company McGraw-Hill in the country. And then came a period between 2009 to 2015 when we saw that the market has started becoming challenging. And that's the period all content companies started diversifying into other streams. And that was the time when I took working with Thomson Learning, which currently is known as Cengage Learning. And we ventured into the test preparation content market, and I scaled up the entire portfolio of that business, where we took the leading position in the test prep content market for JEE over the next 4-year periods. And then I ran the publishing business of Career Launcher for 3 years, where I acquired a boutique UPSC firm and scaled up the business to 7 times of what we acquired that at. And post which I am here at Pearson, where the thought is around the content as a service and assessment as a service to serve the wide needs of the learners. So
Thank you, Sunil. Thank you. Thank you for a very wide range of things that you've done in your life. So I would like to start off our discussion by setting the platform for our discussion, which is fundamentally to talk about the new NEP and what it says about assessment and what its goals are as far as assessment is concerned, and how is it going to change how assessment happens in our country, at least at the K-12 segment of school children. First of all, our assessment mechanisms in the school level started around Macaulay's time, when memorization and reproduction were the key elements that were tested. Over a period of time, we had descriptive certification, analysis, etc., that came into the process. Some point of time around the 70s, 80s, people started looking at, should we start testing for learning outcomes? And that became one of the elements of the testing methodology. Then towards the 90s, we started looking at formative as well as summative education testing, as well as looking at continuous evaluation in the classroom. What we test, how we test, all started going through many changes as we moved along, and technology started being introduced in the classroom. Digital classrooms started emerging, and therefore children and schools slowly started getting used to technology in the classroom. At the same time, there was from around early 2005, 2006, we started finding that there are now online resources available. Really speaking, in the 2010 and afterwards was when a whole lot of resources became available, both for learning and evaluation and testing in different manner across the world. We still do not use too much of online testing at the school level. We are still a very paper and pencil oriented testing mechanisms in schools largely. Though private schools have at different points of time used online testing tools, if you take the country as a whole, we still are a very paper and pencil based testing country. We also must recognize that when we talk about testing is different in different parts of the country, in different geographies, in different types of schools, whether it be international schools, whether they are private schools, which are CBSE or ICSE, or if they are government schools. Testing has different meaning, and testing has different standards in each of these segments, and the way they go about doing testing differs in each of these institutions. Today, the NEP has made a lot of process changes that they have come up with, where they would like to change the way assessment and testing actually happens. They are now talking about introducing higher order thinking skills being evaluated, testing, understanding, comprehension, and application rather than reproduction, testing creativity and the ability to think outside the box as another mechanism. Also, allowing children to learn using an inquiry methodology by asking questions or trying to explore and inquire learning-based mechanisms, and therefore testing to see how much the child is able to do research, inquire, examine, etc. There is also a clear move to go away from the one-time exam, board exam, and the stress that it puts on children. And the NEP now talks about the 360-degree evaluation, as well as looking at the child with a very broad report card as the child progresses through the grades in the school. And these things will evaluate children in a very multifaceted manner. This in turn begins to affect the way we look at a child and the way the child is being assessed as through its journey through the school, and eventually when it becomes ready to move from school education into higher education. This really is the broad spectrum of the situation that we are in. The NEP is going to be launched in most schools in all its various aspects, probably in part from the next academic year, and gradually in the various parts that it has laid out. We will soon be in a position to see the exact way in which this implementation happens in various segments of schools in India. With that, I would like to start by asking Dr. Sridhar to tell us how does he think this is going to impact our test prep industry in this country.
Thank you, Uma. Instead of just focusing on test prep, I would like to focus more on the learning aspect itself and assessments for learning. Because it's a common fact everyone knows. A child learns only what you test him for, only what you assess him for. You may have the best of curriculum, you may have best of content and material, but if you're only going to ask 3 questions, trust me, the child will only go and study 3 questions. He'll not study anything else. Testing determines the learning behavior of the child. And like you rightly said, historically, the way the Indian system has been working has been to test a child's ability to memorize and reproduce facts and information in a book. There's a book which is there, the teacher will teach from the book, the child will go home and memorize the book, and then the test will ask questions from the book. Everything was assessing, memorizing, and learning what is in that book. The world has changed, technology has come, information now is available in plenty. Just because a person is able to memorize facts doesn't make him a worthwhile contributor to society. And if you look for the future, you look at what's coming up next, information is there in your phone, all the facts and figures are there. You want the periodic table, it's there. You want the property of every element, it's there. Just because you memorized it, you know, it doesn't make you particularly worthwhile. So what makes a person relevant and worthwhile is a person's ability to assimilate information, his ability to interpret and understand the information, and lastly, his or her ability to apply that information in solving a problem, in applying the information to move something forward. And these are the skills we need to empower our children with. The old system of just giving questions from a book is not going to get them ready for the system. And hence, like you rightly said, assessments in India will have to undergo a massive transformation. And part of that transformation is the NEP document. I think it's a visionary document that wants to create a system, a pedagogy where children are empowered and trained in this direction. They're becoming relevant for the economy of the future. It wants them to be able to understand by themselves, apply concepts by themselves, and do more of application rather than rote memorization. So what happens to assessments? I deal largely with 11th and 12th standard children, and trust me, in India, they are one of the most widely tested children, student body in the country. Come the months of March, April, May, a typical child in 12th standard who's in the sciences will be writing around 20 tests right now, starting from the board examinations to A, B, C, D, F, G, H. There'll be a line of examinations that they write, a bunch of assessments that the child undergoes. Now, if NEP is to remain true to itself, that it wants to test the ability for the child to understand information, apply information, solve problems with information, the test also has to proportionately change. And one of the scourges we have right now in the country is this plethora of tests which are there. And NEP, one of the vision is to have a single test, and hopefully a single test for each of the verticals. You want to go to engineering, you have a single test. You want to go to law, there's a single test. You want to go to art, there's a single test. They want to develop a single test over there. I think the way forward will only be if technology now is embraced fully by the country, by the regulatory bodies to use technology in your testing. Because the technology gives you the flexibility to really customize every paper as and when the child keeps answering it. I think we should do away with standard single papers with 20 questions for 12 lakh children. And you literally have a database of questions, and adaptively the child is able to, the question papers will keep coming up. And depending on the ability of the child, the performance of the child, the paper gets tougher and tougher. So you truly are able to determine the comprehension of the child, the mastery of the subject by the child, and the ability of the child to be able to apply those concepts in solving problems. So I think one of the changes that will happen, definitely assessments, is becoming technology-based assessments using the computer. And number two, becoming adaptive. This is at the assessment level when the child is coming out and entering into professional courses, when I talk of 11th and 12th standard children. But we also have assessments which are happening in the school during the academic calendar. What is the purpose of these assessments? So these assessments are not to be used to determine and label a child as whether he is good or bad, capable or competent, because that the graduating exam is going to do that anyhow for him. I think these assessments should now become valuable inputs to the depth of learning of the child and help us then customize the learning experience, give personalized content, personalized mentoring, personalized support to the child to ensure that learning happens. That the assessments that's to be done in the school during the academic calendar take on a different role. Their role is not to assess the child, but their role is to assess the learning gaps and then provide adaptive, personalized content for each child to make sure he or she is able to cover that learning gap and go forward. So definitely I see in the 11th and 12th space, and I'm sure in higher education space as well, there's going to be a fundamental disruption and a fundamental transformation of the nature of assessments and the role of assessments itself that have to be done.
Thank you, Dr. Sridhar. Taking off from what you were talking about in terms of what testing is going to be, especially in the 11th and 12th grade, Nirmal, I'd like to ask you to throw some light on some aspects of this with specific focus on how technology is going to play a role when it comes to assessing children on application, higher order thinking skills, critical thinking, ability to innovate, ability to think outside the box. If these are all going to be different facets of a child that you're going to assess, how does technology help in assessing these kind of elements in a child?
Okay, thank you. So number one, I was looking at the NEP document and I was trying to correlate the document with other countries. And I was looking at two countries particularly, one in Europe and the other in North America. And I was trying to look at what are these countries doing and what is the new NEP says. So I'm trying to compare these three slots together. So one of the change that you would notice in the NEP is, in a very subtle way, they're saying that India should move from learning-based assessments to assessment-based learning. Now, what does it mean? It means that if you notice, when I enter to a new class or a new subject, I am being taught by a teacher or anyone who is a moderator. And then either in form of a continuous or a formative, I would be asked questions based what I have taught him. So that's a learning basis. It means I've taught you something. Now I'm going to ask you, what have you learned? Now change the model. So think all of us, why are we so interested in KBCs of the world and quiz shows of the world? Because that's an assessment-based learning model, wherein in ABLs, what we do is when you enter a new module or a new class, I would ask you questions which you have not read, but it's like, okay, I'm asking questions on fractions, but if you're good in division or multiplication, you'll be able to understand it better. If you're not able to comprehend, then I'm not going to teach you that. I'm going to teach you called L1 or L minus. It means that I'm going to start this child something called a division, the concept of division. Now, what does it mean? It means that what Dr. Sridhar also mentioned is when you go to assessment-based learning, and that is what Parak is trying to do, assessment-based learning, is you create a very personalized modules for each candidate. The candidate would not be able to understand this, but you're trying to create a very personalized set of module for the candidate to learn in order to understand the next module or next chapter. Now, over last few years, Norway has been able to possibly put it in a very comprehensive way that what are the basic facilities of an ABL. Now, the second is when I use technology. So there's the two parts of testing. One is the content and something called competencies and tools. So competencies means, let's say if I'm asking English as a language is one of the areas that people want to master. Tool is I can use multiple sets of way of testing that English as a knowledge. So I may use a basic interviewing model. I may give him a reading, I may give him a listening test, or I may throw him on a case study, or may give him a group discussion. And I'm just trying to modulate and see that how is his English as a language or second language. So what am I doing? I'm using this one competency called English as a language, and I'm using multiple tools to judge. Or like in IITs or everywhere, they use multiple competencies using a singular tool called a test on a single day. So these are two areas of, and that is what testing people do. And I'm sure Shunil or you or Dr. Sridhar will be able to comprehend better is, so that's the content part, that how are you going to judge, or how are you going to monitor and benchmark a competency? Are you going to use one competency, multiple tools, or you are going to use multiple tools for one competency? That's the content part. I'm going to focus more on the technology. What is technology? What has technology done, especially in higher education in last 5 years, is they have opened a huge amount of data for people. So for example, few institutions I have noticed, they are beautifully, and I'm not talking about test prep companies, what they are beautifully doing is they are looking at the data point from a distance and they're saying, in the physical classrooms, who should sit with whom, based on not one subject called physics, but modules of physics. So saying that if you look at it, majorly students are little skeptical of asking questions to teachers because of their language or learning capability or the attitude and behavior of a candidate if is coming from a rural place to an urban place. What if data points start telling us that who should, because peer learning, that is what peer learning that the data points give is who should sit with whom, and over a period of time has this person capability or the scoring is moving up or down. That is what the data point that technology gives us. Though it can be done using pen and paper, but it's a very, very tedious task when you're doing for a million odd candidates. Now, third thing is it's very important that the use of technology is how do I ensure that if I'm using a pen and paper test, because that's what all are comfortable with, because generally we'll be able to write fast, cut, put it in other form and things like that. But how do we use technology that I write on pen and paper, but use some technology to convert the whole pen and paper into the OCR format or a pictorial format? It means when an evaluator is looking at it from a distance, let's say I'm taking the test in Gurgaon and Dr. Sridhar is my evaluator, he is taking my evaluation in from Bangalore, then he doesn't, and I'm not testing MCQ, which is multiple choice questions, I'm testing my essay writing skills or my any of the other skills. So how does technology helps that I'm comfortable writing on pen and paper, but technology is capturing it, technology is converting the whole pen and paper images into an OCR format and giving Dr. Sridhar the whole component of my whatever I've written in a digital form. Now, what does it do? Why do I need to do when I have pen and paper? Number one is you keep a historical data of whatever the student has written. So it means that's the number one benefit that it happens. The second is when you score a candidate, it moves into looking at the format, you can move into a digital format. I'm saying I'll give 3 out of 5 or 3.5 out of 5. I can keep a historical data of scores of that candidate or for that batch. That is where the first technological advancement has come in last 3 years' time in testing, in the testing world. Higher education had been using in a very big way. The second is over a period of time when you're looking at a continuous assessment, can the student without being present in the infrastructure, or many schools, especially the semi-urban schools, might not have those many infrastructure, can the students take this test from wherever they are, but still they are secured from two perspectives. One is I'm the right person who is taking the test. Second is my data privacy, whatever I'm writing is going to a right person, they're not been distributed across. Neither my personal credentials have been shared with the other people. That is where technology can take the examination to a large scale. Today, why does examination happens in one day for at least 1 million students? It's because number one is I have to build number of question bank, and number two, I don't have that facility to do it over a period of let's say 20 days or 30 days. But what if, we call it bus testing, but what if India or any other country have the bandwidth and the infrastructure to conduct this test when I want to do it? And I'm not talking about only entrance examination or modular examination. I'm also talking about the continuous examinations. That's where technology would come in, and technology has definitely penetrated. Third is what Dr. Sridhar touched upon, and you also touched upon, Uma, is something called adaptive testing or iterative algorithm. It means as I am answering, the computer is thinking, hey, look, great. Can I give you a next set of questions? Would you be able to attempt that question? Now, this theory has been used for long in gamification. When you play games, when you move from one model to the other, the model will be little complex. And if you cannot, it will move to a simple complex. And it will keep on revolving. So all of us could give answer to 20 questions, and possibly many of us will have, or 4 of us will have 14, 15 correct, but then the marks would be completely different. And why do you do this adaptive testing? One of the reasons of doing adaptive testing was that within a short period of time, how do I gauge many students in order to find who are the best lot? It's more of a shortlisting tool, generally not suggested for learning. it is suggested for shortlisting people to go to the next level. In last 7, 8 years, adaptive testing is coming into the learning space. So what does it mean? Previously, it used to be used for selection. Now it is used for learning. Based on the adaptive testing, can the report or data can tell me that who are the students I should focus more on a specific module or a specific language. Now that's the gamification, or that is the third thing in testing that you would see in next 5 years time. A huge entrance of gamification based testing to check the critical thinking skills or problem solving skills of a candidate, not using MCQs of the world. And last, I would touch upon that you spoke, Uma, is what if technology is going to be used phenomenally and going to be pervasive, then would it be pervasive, or would it be only an urban set of population who would have this? Now, believe me, what we are looking at is semi-urban places. The technology, what we need is two things. One is any form factor, but a good user experience. What does it mean? It means laptop could be 14 inches, 13 inches, 15 inches to a 6-inch or 4.5-inch mobile. Can the experience be same? So that means as we go forward, the form factors would change in technology for conducting tests. And second is bandwidth. Now that's the larger challenge that India has to look at. Giving a mobile phone is pretty easy to candidates, because many governments have done that and they're phenomenal. Many governments have given laptops to girl students or rural students, but use of bandwidth. So bandwidth is that it will create a huge digital divide between people who have or people who would go up economically, they'll move up, and people who would not be there. That's my initial set of thinking, and I would come back next that I will do that.
Okay, thanks, Nirmal. I would like Sunil to comment about the role of private organizations in testing. Now, one of the things that has happened is that all our testing are done by centralized bodies, whether it is CBSE or ICSE or the state boards, or entrance exams being conducted by, say, engineering institutions or medical institutions. There is currently no role for private testing to be accepted in any of these formats. Even schools, during the course of a child's journey, have their own mechanisms, follow their own testing standards. Every school does not utilize the same testing methodology, and therefore, what exactly is the role of private testing organizations in the years to follow?
Thanks, Uma. And before I take up the role of private bodies in terms of testing, I'll try and connect the dots that Dr. Sridhar discussed and what Nirmal talked about. So Dr. Sridhar gets a student once he has done his 10th exam, and his foremost objective is to clear 2 of the most high stakes exams in the country, which can make or break his career. And Nirmal discussed about how the assessments per se can be done across multiple levels, across domains, and in all the 3 forms, whether it is assessment of learning, assessment for learning, or assessment as learning. Now, if I'll go slightly farther and then come back to the need and how the assessments are done. So if we look at the future of workforce, the current skill set or anything which is of rote learning nature would not be in demand, and people will not get those, will all be taken over by machines. And that fundamentally has to shift back towards the early childhood education of a learner, which is exactly what the NEP is proposing. And in terms of the vision document, the NEP correctly outlines the way the assessment has to be done in the foundational years of learning, because if he gets to imbibe inquisitiveness or the skill sets which is needed to succeed in the future, and primarily being 21st century skills, the assessment has to move in that particular direction. So when as private bodies, we look at assessment, we divide this into multiple facets. And the first facet of assessment design is the standardization of learning outcomes. And unless and until we standardize the learning outcome of, let's say, a grade 5 students across the country at multiple levels. And just to give an example, for English as a subject, we divide it as granularly as 90 levels across the paradigm, standardized across grades. So once you, so that's the first level to achieve in terms of standardization of learning outcomes across multiple parameters. Once you are able to do that, you have to design assessments looking at whether you are designing it for a grade 3 students or a grade 8 student. Because the very, and once we do that design, thereafter the role comes how that assessment has to be conducted. And the modern methods of using computer vision, where the student might still write the test on a paper pencil, but that is being captured by the system, which helps you give results. So this is the type of future that we see when we talk about continuous assessments in terms of assessment design and how the assessments would be conducted. Assessments would be conducted more from the learner's usability perspective, rather than what we as organizations think the way they should write the exam. Post this, the most important and the fundamental thing that comes is data analytics. And today, the way we see data analytics, they are still either in a very basic graphical format or they lie in the Excel sheets. So the data visualization has to go to a completely different level for different type of stakeholders to take meaningful decisions. So just to give an example, a principal might want to get a data at a macro level as to how my students are performing vis-a-vis all the other schools in the country. A teacher might need that, how is my student doing on this parameter as compared to all the other students either in the classroom or in my school or in my city or in my state. So once we are able to design this type of a data visualization and multiple reports for multiple stakeholders, the decision making has to be very easy once the data, and this would be possible only when the data visualization happens. And post this comes the actual decision or the interventions which is being brought about either by the system itself to lead learner to the next level, or an intervention by the instructor or by the parent to take him to a different level. So this is the place where we as organizations come into play, from assessment design to data visualization and learning outcome design. And once we are able to do this for a learner over a period of time and generate a longitudinal report of the way he has progressed so far, we will actually be able to derive the type of career that he or she would actually aim for, or what his passion is. So this is where I would want to end with respect to the role that the private bodies like ours can play. We as a company have been doing similar activities with multiple other in multiple other countries, both at a private level and at government levels as well. With NEP, the aim is to reach there, but these are some of the things that I think would be needed in the dream destination that we are looking at.
Thank you, Sunil. Dr. Sridhar, in our country, we are faced with often some really weird and bizarre situation with regard to assessment. As recent as just about a year or so ago, some colleges in Delhi University declared that the cutoff point for admission in colleges in Delhi would be 100%. Now, this is a very unique situation in the world. I have, in all my effort to research this, I have not come across any country where a college says 100% is my cutoff limit. What does this tell us about our assessment system? how does it reflect on the child or the system that we are using to assess the child? And going forward in the NEP, we are again talking about a whole lot of subjective assessments, whether it is application, higher order thinking skills, ability to do critical thinking, out of the box thinking, application of knowledge. A lot of this is very subjective in nature. And these are things that you cannot get 100%, hopefully not. Now, how would we transition from a system which says you need to get 100% to get into, say, a commerce college, to using these kind of assessments?
Very, very important question. And you're very right. A very shocking fact when you read in the paper that the cutoff is 100% or 99.7%. And that's been happening for multiple years, actually, for now. And the reason this has happened is because your board exam is trying to satisfy two very conflicting requirements. There is one requirement from the bigger social cause of education, which says that, hey, I need to get as many children out of my system with a chap saying that you have finished 12th pass. The 12th pass certificate is very critical as a society for us to have lots of people going to the system and saying, I have finished my 12th grade. And on the other hand, you have your premium institutions, which have very limited seats. You've got 12 lakh people coming out. You've got 1,000 seats or 200 seats. They have to now select from this 12 lakh students and put them into their respective colleges. So they need an elimination kind of an examination. And whereas your social cause requires a assessment kind of an examination to say, have you learned what I've asked you to learn? And this dichotomy is what caused this problem. That if I want to make more people pass, I'm going to make a simpler paper, or I'm going to have a very standard paper that I'm only going to ask you these questions. You memorize it, you will get your marks. And that's how the board exams have been evolving. And so a smart kid who sits and studies and works hard can get 100 on 100. And the board really doesn't care. They're only assessing whether you've learned the material I've given you. If the whole country gets 100 on 100, the board is very delighted, saying we've done a great job. We've got lovely teachers, lovely institutions. All our children have learned what we want them to learn. But on the other hand, I have institutions that have limited capacity. And so your cutoffs kept going higher and higher and higher. So NEP is looking at addressing it from what I've been reading. Number one, they want to make the charter of the board exam very simple. The charter of the board exam is not to assess you whether you're good for engineering or law or science or commerce. The charter of the board exam is to say, hey, here's a certificate stating you have got these basic skills. Basic math or advanced math, basic English or advanced English. They're assessing whether you have that competency, and they give you a certificate saying, boss, you're done. It only establishes the baseline. It does not provide the admission criteria to go into any professional courses. And now you have Parak and the NTA, which comes into play and says that, okay, leave the board exam aside, which is for basic competency. Now you want to become an engineer. I have my requirements. And you should know mathematics, you should know physics, you should know chemistry, a certain level of competency. And so I have a different examination to gate your admission into professional courses. So this is the NTA body, which now administers these exams. For engineering, we have the JEE. For medical, we have the NEP. We have a plethora of exams for engineering. Hopefully, all of that should coalesce and become a single examination. So each field needs different specializations. A person interested in engineering need not master biology, whereas a child going for medicine has to know biology. A child interested in accountancy need not know biology or physics. He has to know mathematics and statistics. So based on the career options children want to make, they will have the choice of selecting those subjects in their high school. In 9, 10, 11, 12, they can start taking electives that help them specialize in that direction. And the board examination just gives them the standard charm. They will then go write a professional body, a professional examination for entrance. So I want to go into commerce. I will have a set of papers on commerce, which will have basic math, basic English, and then specialized on commerce related papers. And now the trick is, how do you design these examinations? This becomes very critical. The NEET and JEE is a first step in that direction. They are definitely much tougher examinations than the board exam. They definitely are testing application skills than what the board exam does. They're looking at problem solving skills than what the board exam does. But I personally believe a single size fits all will not work here. Also, you need to have an adaptive algorithm being put into the system so that as the child starts performing better and better, you get tougher and tougher questions, and you're able to truly assess the depth of learning and understanding of each child. And then you'll not have this 100% situation ever again, because there is no 100%. You keep doing better, I'll give tougher and tougher questions, your bar keeps going higher. But then we are able to truly assess a child's ability to master the knowledge given to him. I think along with this, another fundamental change that should happen is the admission process. When I look at the US system, you have the SAT exams, and India would also evolve a similar exam system where you can write the test multiple times in the year. But then their admission process is a mess. You got to apply to each university independently. They have their own review mechanisms. You're spending 3-4 months just filling application forms to make your application to get into a college. Very stressful, a lot of chance for ambiguity over there, not transparent and easy. That way, the Indian system is slowly migrating to a single portal. Medical admissions are only through a single portal. So you return your one exam, you want to apply, you say, yes, I want to apply. The portal automatically sucks in your marks from the NEET examination. You fill your choice, you fill your bucket list. They have the criteria, they select and assign you the colleges as per the marks and what is available. I think a similar thing should come for engineering. A similar should come for commerce. Similar should come for law, should from arts and humanities, that there becomes a simple, transparent portal wherein you do an assessment test, which you can do multiple times. You determine your competency, that data is available. It goes into the portal. You have your schools depending on your geographical location. This is my bucket list of 25 schools I want to fill up. And then you have a single algorithm that then goes and assigns the school, and then you join the school of your choice. A country like India with so many children, so much competition, with so many colleges, the process of streamlining the admission into professional courses also should be something the government should take and make a solid tech-based engine in the background. And it's moving in that direction. I think when you combine both of these, board examinations separated from the assessment exam being adaptive so that it really tests the bar, and then an admission process which is able to automatically take in the data of the assessment test and assign children. The moment this falls in place, I don't think you'll have any more this 100% cutoff stories happening ever again in India. I think that's the future, and that's the way the country is going to be progressing and growing.
Thank you, Dr. Sridhar. Nirmal, coming to you on something that you said earlier. I would like you to talk about a couple of things that come from what Dr. Sridhar has been also saying. If we are going to prepare children to be at different levels of competence and then have an examination that will enable them to get admission, your first problem is going to be the NEP already talks about using AI and other tools to assess a child when it comes to certain subjective criteria that it has laid out. Number two is, if the child is allowed to test itself multiple times and it's going to be adaptive and then, keep getting tougher as each time that it takes a test. And all of this assumes greater levels of use of technology. And as you mentioned, it's also a big bandwidth issue. We often talk about bandwidth issues in our country, but behind that bandwidth issue, if you go into smaller towns and villages, is also availability of power. Is power available? Only if power is available are my devices going to work. Now, in that kind of large, and over a period of time, government has now said that all the states should conform to a standard curriculum and syllabus for grades 11 and 12. So that when you are testing at grade 12, it becomes a similar test across the country. And today, more or less, I think over 20 states are already conforming to that level of testing in that level. When you look at this, how do I then use technology? Would technology become a divide, like you were speaking? Would that become a barrier between those who have access and those who do not have access? Would the kind of device that children would be able to access, whether it's a laptop or a tablet or a phone, who can afford what? Will government then be made to provide children with these kind of devices? Some of these states have already started providing these devices. And how would this on a large scale be implemented?
Thanks, Uma. So, it's very important that we are talking about a standardized test and a one agency doing a test. And when I say agency, it could be a central agency or a state agency. However, the whole framework has to change. Think, if I have to take JEE or I have to take an engineering test on a day that is prescribed by the government, and if I have any inadvertent issue or I cannot take for any reason, I have to wait for the next year. So what Dr. Sridhar also mentioned, what ACT or many people do in India, is they would conduct these tests, for example, GMAT to be the best example, over a period of time. So they call intervals. For every interval, they would be conducting these tests. However, your academic cycle should also allow this to happen. It means you cannot have everyone joining in July session. You have to have either summer or a winter or an autumn, summer, winter, whatever it is. It means that there are 2, 3 kind, there could be 4 or 5 or 6 frequencies I can take these tests. And I would choose that I would go for I'm taking for the autumn, or I'm taking for the regular session. Now, Indian system, as on date, I have not seen, I may be little incorrect and you or Dr. Sridhar can answer. They're talking about multiple entries and multiple exits, but they're not talking about multiple academic semesters. So it will be little tough for any one agency to conduct one test or multiple tests. They must be conducting for a one semester or the single entry examination, and within that examination system, they could be conducting multiple tests. But we are not talking about that. Flexibility technology should do. Technology should be flexible enough to be taken as my wish, and there could be 2, 3 sets of entry into the higher education system. And when I say higher education system, I'm talking about students moving from standard 12th to standard 13th. As of now, it's standard 12th. Now, it means overhaul, and this will take time. This is not a one day or a 1 year thing. This will take time, and we have to be a little patient about this. Now, second is it a good idea to one agency to conduct all tests for a academic program? Yes and no. I'm sure you know that even ACT in US, there have been many objections for ACT in US. It is happening. So why? Because let's say I come, so it means one is your tests have to be really vernacular. That's number one. Number two, it has to be standardized. It means if I should not be getting anything less than a people studying in Delhi or best of the schools. And number three, the access to information. The access to information, just in this case of Corona happened, the access of information, actually, it was very different from a very urban population to a semi-urban population to a rural population. Now, what does it mean? It means I have lost standard 6th, I have lost standard 8th, I have lost to 9th. You put me into next class, it's so completely okay. But the access to information that I would have got if I would have joined a regular program or regular schooling, that would have definitely, that 6th standard would never come back to me. Now think of a student who is standard 9th and moving to 10th, or standard 11th student moving to 12th without having that kind of access to information from a rural perspective. Now it means you would find this set of students to be lesser if they're not putting their own energy and whatever, and then teachers are not getting advanced. You'll see India's next 2 years will have a different set of people, and you'll be able to see that in these scores that will come in 2023, and you'll be able to see these scores in IITs and NETs. And I'm telling you to monitor this in next 2 years' time. You'll be able to see some standard deviation happening there. That's my point of view of standardization. The second is we all have to believe that, and Uma, we published something called a very standard report with government called India Skills Report. And in one of the recommendations we are putting is India would only cannot catch up with the whole demography thing that we're talking about, is if people don't have access to a digital device, and internet is not pervasive to them. Internet is not available to them. And when I say internet, it means I'm talking about bandwidth. Now, and we have seen at multiple places, Uma, that, and one of the best example is a hole in the wall that Zogata did in NIT, wherein he said, give devices to people, don't give teachers, don't give anything. They would ensure that they would learn by themselves. And that is the experiment many African countries, Indian countries, and many subcontinent of Asia, that they are Indian countries that they have been doing. Now, what does it mean? It means if you give device, if you give enable internet to them, and if you give content that they are happy to see, not learn, happy to see, they'll be able to experiment and they'll be able to gain knowledge. Now, teacher is only an access to information, nothing more than that. A dictionary is an access to information. Why is teacher more prominent? Because he can also speak, he can also understand, he can also teach. Where in a dictionary you got to learn, it means it's a one way and teacher is a two way. But somehow in next 5 to 7 years, you will see that with internet, the knowledge will be two way, and you'll have the best of the teachers learning with communication happening. And then you may not have a digital divide between an urban and rural population. We are far from that place now. Now, what should we do? The number one thing is device, and the devices which have minimum 6 to 8 hours of battery capacity. Typically, we call it mobile phones are the best, followed by laptops, followed by tablets, not laptops. So that's number one focus. Wherever we work with the government, our number one recommendation is, if you want your student to catch up or have knowledge without even having teacher, first is give them device with pre-built or inbuilt something, or if there is an internet, that's good. Second is what we see in India today. Believe me, what COVID did for us, COVID took the whole country, when it comes to digital, the whole country 5 years ahead. So what we could have achieved in next 5 years, we are going to see in 2022. So what does it mean? It means EdTech, and when I say EdTech, I'm not talking about private companies, I'm talking anywhere in EdTech. EdTech will be the hyped word for next 5 years. So there will be a thinner and thinner line in between urban and rural. What government should do is give them digital devices, and you'll see that digital divide is going far. That's my view, and that is what we have been talking to the government agencies. But many things, we think it is good, but it doesn't happen the way we think. But see a recent report from Tamil Nadu, Himachal, Uttarakhand, Delhi. So you got to see that how many devices have been given to school students in these 4 states, and what is the pass percentage in last 4 years they have done, and what is the GER in these 4 states. You will be able to see something and possibly extrapolate and correlate, saying that it has something to do with digital form, to do with either improving the pass percentage or improving the GER in those states. That's where I'll stop now.
Thanks, Nirmal. Sunil, I want to ask you a follow-on question based on what Dr. Sridhar and Nirmal have been talking about. This is with regard to content that is available across the country. Now, largely publishers in India, the leading publishers in India, have focused their content in English language. Whereas now we are talking about a universal exam across states, exams that can be written in any language that the child prefers. Therefore, preparation for exams will happen in that language. English will no longer be a dominant language for testing or learning, and children will have the opportunity to compete in their own language. Now, one of the key disadvantages is that much of the content that is available in government schools, digital or paper-based, is produced by government agencies. Private companies largely have not produced the same content that is available to private schools for government schools. How do you see private companies becoming a part of this big makeover that the government is planning to do with the NEP?
Correct. Thanks, Uma. And continuing from where Nirmal left, and what you brought about, Uma, availability of this content on all those devices in vernacular languages would be other key component for all these assessments to succeed. And if that delta was X in case of the device availability and the availability of content in English, that delta will definitely be X plus Y if the content and assessments is given in the language in which a learner learns and a teacher teaches. So we and together with learning and assessments, we have started looking at the models in which when we create this content at the outset, we keep in mind the multiple languages that the content has to go through. And here also the use of Google Translate and few of the other AI, ML, auto translate technologies together with voice to text are being evaluated, where you create a content once and then with little intervention, little manual intervention, this gets auto translated into multiple other languages. So that's the written content side of it. And together with the written content side of it, we are also evaluating about the use of technologies like voice to text, where a written content in a particular language gets voice translated into another language. So though we do not yet have a foolproof answer to this in terms of how much automation would happen, but we have started looking at and started moving in the direction where we think that we need to create some of those models where the content is available in multilingual, which is the need of a country like India.
Okay, thanks, Sunil. Coming back to you, Dr. Sridhar, this is a more a business-related question rather than a academic-related question. It is estimated by various estimates ranging from 2 billion at a very modest estimate to many, many billions to be the market size of the test prep industry in India. Some estimates are much larger, some estimates are closer to 2 billion, but 2 billion seems to be a relatively moderate estimate. There are players who are online test prep agencies. There are companies which are in the edtech space, which are into the tutorial business. And there are brick and mortar establishments in different parts of our country. For example, Kota and how famous Kota has become with even a Bollywood movie based on Kota. Now,
And a TV series.
Obviously, this is all going to lead to a very big change in their business model. What they have been able to do till now is going to change dramatically because, like we have been discussing, it is not about preparing a child for, it's not about learning, but preparing a child for assessment. Now, if we are going to look at the NEP and the 360-degree evaluation of a child, multifaceted assessment of a child, multiple times that the child will attempt an exam, and so many different new things that come, this is going to have a dramatic impact on this $2 billion business. I would like your thoughts on this, on how it impacts this business.
Very simple, Uma. It just makes the business even bigger. The prep market is not going to go away anywhere else. As long as you have a supply-demand shortfall, the number of colleges offering good education is 1/20th or 1/100th of the number of children who aspire to study there. As long as you have the supply-demand gap, which is there, parents and children want that extra edge, they're going to go for classes and coaching to get that extra edge. So I don't see anything happening there except becoming bigger and bigger. Its face will change. The way it is being done will change. Basic knowledge remains the same. Yeah? Whether I go for engineering, a medical exam or a law exam, if my course is going to be accounts doesn't change. I need a teacher who's going to teach accounts. The format may be different. You may teach it in a brick and mortar, or you may teach it in a virtual conferencing, virtual class. The format may be different, but you need that teacher to teach that content. But the other major change that's going to be done is how are you going to be testing the child through the course? How are you going to give feedback to the child through the course? This is where the whole system is going to learn up, wake up, adapt itself, embrace technology. Those who don't will get left behind, and those who are quick to adopt it, use it, morph based on it, will keep growing and building up. So this industry is going to become much bigger. I have no doubt about it. But I'd like to go on to another aspect of this, which I think is actually going to be very good for the country and the nation. There was a discussion about the urban-rural divide that was there, and the discussion focused a bit on devices not being available. Yep, power not being available. So I'd like to separate out the issue over here. There is one which is the final assessment being done by the NTA or any other body. They are very much capable of providing devices and power. They have exam centers all over the world, all over the country. They will make sure a child can go write it. The backup will be there. So the assessments can be done. I don't think that's going to have any technological glitches. It will happen. And the child can be in rural or in urban India. He will have an equal opportunity to go and write that examination. So I think that way it's going to be a good leveler. There's no issues involved. The challenge is access to information, access to teacher, access to learning, to give the rural child also as much a fair chance as the urban child in getting an admission in a top college. The current system, like you rightly said, Umar, is very heavily favored, lopsided in favor of the urban child. The urban child has got the best of teachers. The urban child has all the content that he needs. The urban child has technology. So definitely the urban child is at a big advantage, and that reflects in the admission profiles when you see into all the top colleges. I believe technology is going to help level that playing field. And that can be done through your government. Lots of initiatives of governments to introduce and provide computers in the classrooms, tabs in the classrooms, or computers in the labs. If these computers are now enabled with content, which is a standalone local content, I don't need internet access. I may not have a good broadband pipeline. I don't need it. I will have a standalone content which is going to be available there. Video content, question papers, with an adaptive personalized engine over there. It is very much possible. It's like the hole in the wall. The child has got the device, the child has got a teacher who's taught the basic, and then you give them the access to these content, to these devices on campus. The child goes and spends 2 hours more in the evening from 4 o'clock to 6 o'clock and starts playing and learning by himself. This is something he did not have till date. If he left the teacher in the classroom, the teacher in the classroom knew a certain level of information, did not know the higher level of information. The child had no recourse. He only had to take a book and try to read by himself. Now, content, technology, lectures, assessments, everything can be made available to the child in these organizations. And I think in this way, there definitely will be a better level playing field for the rural child to be able to learn and compete with the urban child as well. And like Sunil said, this for this to be successful, definitely content has to be in multiple languages, not only English, which is once again very heavily biased for the urban child. It has to be in the local language, vernacular, where the exams are being conducted. Then certainly these children also will be able to learn and compete with the other children. Now, what does all this mean for the prep market? Now, this again is a massive opportunity to reach out to the rural child through technology. So it may not be that quota will be recreated in multiple small towns, but the knowledge generated from quota will be digitized, will be restructured, will be repackaged and made available everywhere. It will be democratized and go to much larger places. So this 2 billion, I think, is going to become multiple billions. And hey, good for it as long as it helps the society, helps the child, helps even out the playing field, and ensure that children with talent, with the fire in the belly, are able to get the education that they deserve. So technology and assessments are definitely going to be dramatically altering that landscape.
Thank you, Doctor. Nirmal, another question from what Sunil and Dr. Sridhar have been talking about. Now, assume that we already have a 4G network more or less across the country. The government and the service providers are talking about a 5G network rollout very soon. Let's take 2 or 3 years ahead. And let us assume that you have a reasonably stable 4 or 5G network across the country and bandwidth no longer becomes a limiting factor. If you look at the recent past over the last 2 or 3 years, we find that success stories are getting highlighted across different platforms of children from very, very disadvantaged families succeeding in different spheres of life, whether it's the administrative service or any other such activity. This has largely been attributed to the ability for even those children to access and have access to information, even using a simple smartphone, a low-cost smartphone. The ability to absorb, access information, and then be able to compete is slowly improving. What used to be the domain of the Indian middle class is now pervading downwards. So disadvantaged children are also being, in some small way, able to compete. Now, where I'm headed is that if you look at government schools, and assuming that Sunil and various other publishers have made language content available, and like Dr. Sridhar said, there are devices available in the schools where language content is available on that device that is there in the school, and internet is no longer a huge stumbling block or a limiting factor. The other limiting factor used to be the quality of teachers in the government institutions versus the quality of teachers in private institutions, large. A recent study says that government salaries for teachers in most cases is much higher than the salaries of private school teachers across the country. Now, by that, I am not comparing it with the best of the international schools or the high-end private schools. Given all of this, children can then compete at a very, very high level, irrespective of where they are. If they are allowed to learn anywhere, anytime learning, and anywhere, anytime assessment, there are no limiting factors that my teacher did not show up, as in government schools, teachers don't show up, or the teacher is not qualified, etc. All those factors go away. How do you think technology is going to be the big push to standardizing and making a level playing field over the next 5 years?
Thanks, Uma. So with my very limited experience, you'll find it's a little conundrum. So you'll find two set of people, because I work with publishers, content publishers, we work with government. Government think that they can do everything by themselves, even content development, bringing standard and everything. And private companies, I'm talking about large and mid-sized companies, they think that they build the best content. So the you have to understand both of them. In higher education, they have little come together, but in the K-12 is very controlled environment that we work in India. India is very controlled when it comes, I'm talking about regulations, very controlled environment. Now, number one thing I'm sure NEP should do is open up access to information across schools. Whoever best can provide, bring them on. Don't say these are private companies, these are government agencies. Government agencies should bring the content. We have the best of the teachers. Even private companies, they would say we are bringing the world-class content. We are possibly we have best of the content there. We have experience. How do we merge these two? The moment it happens, and NEP should drive, the education minister should drive, is we have to bring these two together in the K-12. What you did little or you did moderately okay in the higher education space, mainly technical and professional education space. Now, what I'm sure, just to add a little, in professional and technical education space, because we work closely with AICTE, we know getting an outside teacher with plethora of experience is easy today. They can come and they can teach in the technical education or business schools or even medicine. It's very easy today compared to 10 years back. The same has to be done in the K-12 space. That's number one. Number two is how do you create models? And this is what we struggle in the sector skill space, in the skilling space. If you look at engineering, the model of why do people go for engineering? Because that looks to be a stable, uh, innovative, contributing job for any candidate who would look forward to it. It means I'm able to contribute something. I would have a secured career, and I can think out the box possibly to do something that will satisfy my needs. Same goes to medicine, same goes to other programs. So it means they create models. I get attracted to looking at an engineer when let's say when my uncle has done phenomenally good in life becoming an engineer or a doctor. I said, can I look at that? So he is my model there. Same happens in the games. So any game that goes over, that is what we have seen. In 20 years time, any game moves to the one stage to stage 10 if they can create models. For example, is it a sustainable? Can I make money? Can I have name? Can I have fame? In the world of government school or in the world of teaching, you'll find we don't have models. I don't imply to become, or I don't wish to become a government teacher. A teacher, number one. Number two is a government teacher, because I don't have models. But what you're seeing is anything would do great if we can create models. So what it means, if we have many multiple cases of disadvantaged students becoming great engineers or joining IITs, going outside to do programs on scholarship, you give me an impetus to do hard work, because if Ramesh can go, I can also go. So number one thing is why did Ramesh could go to Stanford, or why could he go to MIT to do his further studies? It's because identify what are the levers for that, which is, does he have a better access to information? Does he have the devices and devices could be a human device or a technical device. And most importantly, did he outplay his role as a model and say, I want to break this economic shackle and I have to move forward in my life. And that is what we would be able to create. One of the levers is definitely digital divide. If we give them digital access to information, we will be able to have many more students coming out from this category. I'm saying 5 to 7 years down the line. Now, 5G or 4G are the speed of communication. And because this is recorded, however, many of us, if it would have been a live session, many of us would have acknowledged, even when in Gurgaon and Bangalore and Delhi, we have 4G, but communication sometimes go absolutely, we will not be able to make a video call and things like that. Forget 20 kilometers far from Gurgaon or 30 kilometers far from Bangalore, what would be the status of that? So what does it mean? You don't need 4G or 5G, you need a consistent bandwidth. So that is the challenge. The challenge is very far from that. It means, do you have towers which can give you consistent bandwidth to a number of devices connected? That's a very high level challenge I'm talking about. Now, when the bandwidth reaches there, how does it goes to each device? Because in order to run a decent communication like this, all you need is between a download of 500, 600 and close to 600, 800 kbps of upload. That would do a decent job. You might not have a HD quality, but you'll have a decent job. So it means all we as a government, apart from devices, has to look at a better connectivity. It means I can have an access to a tower, which can, whenever I'm looking at, I can connect to. So it means proliferation of towers or optical fiber if it is using that. And the second is a constant connectivity, even at a 1 Mbps, 2 Mbps, I'm okay with that. Now, this is what India is trying to achieve under Universal Access Program, if I'm not wrong. This is what India is trying to achieve. So what we see in next 5 years, Uma, is a great achievement when it comes to the reaching to the tier 2, tier 3 cities. One thing we are missing here is, and we got to look at that, is my instinct to grow and come out of that economic shackle. As a child, I'm not interested to go further. I don't see a role model there. Why do I learn hard when I can have an equal kind of remuneration doing other things? And that is why you see almost 87, 86% of dropouts happening between class nursery to higher education, which is standard 13th. Because one is definitely economic liabilities. The second is there no access, there's no uh, model for me to go there to earn more, because end of the day, if I'm earning the similar level of salaries, I'm not motivated to do that. That's the one thing that we must, NEP should look at. They have looked at it in a very minute way. We are talking moderators and mentors and things like that. But we got to be looking at counseling at a very, very in standard sixth upwards, counseling. And I'm talking about the best of the counselors, talking to use the access to information and move across and say, this is what is happening in the field of sports. This is what is happening in the fields of engineering. This is what is happening in the fields of media or any of the softer side. And I get to see a model there. I say, hey, can I do it? And then I use my digital device and internet to have an access to information, move forward in my life. Migration will keep on happening, so let's be prepared with that, because we can give them access to information, but better jobs will still be at tier 2, tier 1 cities. It will not go in next 5 years, it will not go to tier 3 cities and rural places. So migration would happen. But I think you will see a next 5 to 7 years, because anyway with COVID we have come 5 years. And what we were talking in 2020, we're talking 10 years, and you'll be able to see in 27, 28, you'll be able to see that is happening there.
Thanks, Nirmal. Sunil, I'm going to ask you a slightly different question. Now, if you look at the NEP, you find that there is a lot of talk about individual learning plans. So far in our entire academic learning programs, we find a lot of focus based on children with learning difficulty, slow learners. How do you deal with them? How do you identify them? How do you provide remedial learning, etc.? And that is now happening. Bodies like CBSE have mandated that schools should have counselors, people that children can go there and understand and speak to and get counseling and remedial learning. But the new NEP also talks about the gifted child and how we have a gifted child program. Now, this is something new. This is not there anywhere in the country. Very few schools have specific programs for gifted children. And today, most publishers also do not have specific publications for either the slow learners or the gifted children. We have publications mostly to do with the average student. How do you think this is going to evolve as time goes by and we want to encourage the gifted child?
Okay, so a very, very important and pertinent question when we talk about inclusivity across education. So being a part of Pearson, we do have certain programs or certain criteria in the West when we develop content. How do we make it accessible for a gifted child? So to that extent, I do not have a very clear answer to this at this stage as to how we would move along in this direction. But yes, some discussions internally have started happening as to how we move forward in that in this particular direction, where the content can be used by a gifted child together with an average child. So Uma, to be frank, I do not have a very clear answer to this as to how we would be addressing this.
If I just add one word on it, Uma, I think this is a very important point, is how do you address various learning levels in the classroom, and any country hoping to really bring out the best in the children will have to address this issue. You are going to have gifted children, you're going to have children who are struggling. Yeah, how do I take care of it. So I think fundamentally one of the other transformations that will keep happening in the classroom is to give much more flexibility in the academic calendar. Right now, our Indian system is very rigid. You go to any school, they've got 10 periods and it's all chopped out over there. It's predetermined: math, science, social science, English, art, sports, etc. Everything is predetermined. It's a cookie cutter model. All children have to go through that same setup. Going forward, I think you'll start getting more flexibility into the model. And a very simple way of doing flexibility, which is already starting to come, is to now have a blended learning model. So if I'm learning mathematics, for example, I'm learning fractions. I go into the classroom and my teacher will teach me the basics of fractions. And in the traditional system, the teacher would give 3 questions to be done at home. The child will go home, do the homework, take the parents' help, come back next day, and the teacher will teach the next set of concepts. In the blended learning model, which is slowly starting to take shape all over the world, and India also will definitely go down that path, the teacher would teach a chapter on fractions and follow it up with a interaction with the technology product. It may be in the classroom or it may be in the lab. And basically the child is now going to go back, and now what the teacher has taught in fractions, the questions will come, preferably in a little gamified manner to make it enjoyable for the child. Child will answer it, gets it wrong, has a video, watches the video, starts interacting now with that question bank database. And it's not online, it will be standalone systems over there. And now personalized learning will happen. The child is doing well in fractions, more advanced concepts are taught, more examples are given, videos are available, that the child is able to now go ahead. So the child may be in grade 2, but he can start doing grade 3 level partial fractions questions because he's fast, he's learning, it starts personalizing and pushing him forward. And over time, you'll start identifying the gifts within varying children, who's good in math, who's good in music, who's good in sports. And then you'll then start creating small focus programs for them, which is able to build on their gift further. So moving away from a rigid cookie cutter model, same education for all, to a little more blended personalized learning is a transformation again that's bound to happen in the education system. And I think like Sunil or Nirmal had said, COVID has basically leapfrogged the whole education system by 5 years. What are taken 5 years to adapt, to accept, to embrace technology? It's happened in 1 year. And now there are just lots more changes and transformations that start happening in the classroom and in the education system.
Uma, just to add on your gifted child content accessibility, we do have specific guidelines across multiple countries, depending upon the need and the request from academic institutions. We have been providing the content in the form in which it can be it becomes accessible to a gifted child.
Okay, good point. Nirmal, I have another follow-on question on this. You know, both Sunil and Dr. Sridhar talked about identifying children who have learning difficulty, as well as children who are slightly ahead of the curve as far as the class is concerned. Now, and therefore providing them with the tools to learn, etc. But I want to go one step before that. Our traditional mechanism of finding out who is ahead of the curve and who's not is firstly look at the classroom and say the last 2 rows are behind the curve and the first 2 rows are ahead of the curve, and everything in between is the average. We also know that 90% of our teachers teach to the middle of the class. Our teachers don't have the time or the capability to deal with the back of the class or the front of the class. We have pressure on syllabus, we have time constraints, we have all of those, and we have overcrowded classrooms. This brings up the challenge that how am I going to find out these children who are having trouble or children who are boisterous because they are bored and ahead of the class. The next problem is that the NEP talks about building individual learning plans, personalized learning, which means that I have to assess a child, find out where the child stands, what it knows well, what it doesn't know well, find those gaps, and then help the child fix those gaps. Also challenge the child to do better than what it is doing, because it is ahead of the class. It's in terms of its ability, it can be pushed further. This means you are continuously assessing a child and building these individual learning plans. We have talked in the education space over the last, I don't know, maybe 10, 15 years of building IEPs and ILPs, but not many schools, even in the private domain, have been successful in developing or implementing these plans. This is according to me, this is an assessment and evaluation challenge. How do you reckon technology can play a role in doing this quickly, efficiently, and being able to give the teacher the tools to address this?
Okay, thanks. It's a very personal question to me. Um, so look at this. I think I mentioned this. Um, an assessment is potentially an assessment. I don't mean or a test. An assessment in any format, even a discussion, two discussions happening, and I'm trying to gauge your mind, and you are trying to gauge my mind, is also a form of an assessment. So an assessment is the best form of learning. And using that data point, if I recall, I was saying even seating capacity, seating structures are based on those assessment data scores. Now, would you believe in one of the two, three countries now? So what they do is, and they're just experimenting this. Whenever they're teaching social science, they're using a model called use type seating structure. It means students will sit like this. Whenever they are teaching a language or anything that needs very much peer learning, they are using a round table seating structure. Anywhere there where it is a more of a monologue happening, and it could be a teacher and student and a student and a student, they're using a theatrical system. It means one by one after one. That is the so they have seen that changing the seating structure changes the form of learning. Only changing by the seating structure. Forget same teacher, same student, but the learning is differentiating between when you change the seating structures. Who is guiding that? You remember the data score that I said, the scores that are coming out? The scores have phenomenally moved up when you're changing the seating structure. How are you deciding that which session should have what kind of seating structure? So today, when you go to schools, many schools have very open plan. I mean, the schools which are designing now, and I'm sure you must, because you are so much into K-12, they have open layout. It means I would choose my seating based on the subject or the kind of class that is coming in. The second is, what's happening in the schools today, because you have two students in a class who are little, who have a person with disability. And this is the learning disability I'm talking about. Now, how do and they're not good in, let's say, maths, or they have dyslexia, so they're not able to figure out the numerical components. So, but what do I do with these two students when especially they are in standard 7th or standard 6th? Because I don't have, for two students, I cannot create a new batch in standard 7th. So the two things I do. One, I put them into the same batch and I don't talk about it. I say everyone is studying maths. Now, few students are scoring less. I cannot, though the teacher knows, but still he or she cannot do anything about it. The other format is, they're saying in these two students, when the maths is happening, and this I'm talking about bigger schools, standard schools, these two students would do something else. So it means they can be in the class and do something else, or you have many batches where you have such students, bring them into a counseling room and teach them on some other component. So that's called a third or a skill component that they're trying to bring out. Now that is what is happening today. Now, I'm talking about experiential schools, I'm talking about IB schools, I'm talking about government schools, because I have an access to these informations. Now, what would happen if you use technology? Many things can take on. Number one is, if you have only one student in standard 7th or two students in standard 7th, is there anything happening around these set of schools where in that session, I have a communication class going on or a pottery class going on for 50 students in Gurgaon, but they are connected to technology in the lab. Think of that world. And because it is happening at one place, so I know it. technology can solve so many things. However, you have the only thing that we got to be very pushing is the teacher training. I'm sure you would talk today or sometime else that how would they because teachers are not adapted to a new model of teaching. In COVID, many teachers were very skeptical of using technology for teaching. And they took almost a month or two to understand the whole concept of teaching, because for them is, I don't have control. The choice of leaving control made them really shiver. So it means in a classroom, I have control. I can control and say, you stand, you sit, you come forward. And in digital form, it doesn't happen like that. So the teachers have to be equally or more taught if you really want the access to information, and digital access should go to the schools, especially who don't have this kind of infrastructure. You have to have a very different teacher training on other components, but how do you teach using digital have to be taught to us, our teachers. That could take you to next stage.
Sunil, another question that I want to ask you. Now, when we look at all of these problems that we have in terms of the content that is available, the kind of testing that is available, I know that Pearson does clinical testing, not only for psychological testing, but also for learning level testing. Now, and there are many companies today which specialize in these kind of tests for children to assess both psychological as well as learning level assessments. How do you think this would be of use in, say, a government school to be able to assess a child and say, now you can, based on these results, you can now start building a learning program for that child?
So Uma, I go back to the same fundamental concepts of how the personalized learning is being designed. So the starting point for everything that we do, first of all, is standardization. And when we standardize, we arrive at a learning outcome. Basis that learning outcome, the assessments are designed. And once we design that assessment, the assessment itself is designed in such a way that the answer that the student gives allows us to understand the type of misconceptions that he has, or what are the areas where he is not understanding. So basis that particular answer that he has given, we are able to arrive at what is it that he should be doing to close the gap on his learning, to his current learning and the learning outcome that is expected out of this particular question. So once we are able to arrive at a particular point that these are the interventions that need to be brought about for this particular concept, for this particular learner, this in a self-learning environment throws the next set of contents and assessment which allows him to learn. And in an instructor-led environment, this goes to the instructor with a set of content again and assessments which he can assign to the learner, and thereby again track his performance, that whether he has learned or not. So this is how a personalized learning environment is being brought about for a learner. And once we do this at an aggregate level, we are able to club the students together with respect to a particular misconception that he has for a subject. And then at a class level, they will be able to group students saying that these are the X number of students who have doubts in this particular subject. So this is how it happens at a class level. And once the enough data comes in at an aggregate level, we would be able to figure out that as a community, these are the misconceptions or these are the learning gaps that individuals have, and programs designed basis that particular level.
Okay, thank you, gentlemen. It has been a pleasure discussing this with you, and so many new things, so many new thoughts, so many, what should I say, great inputs on how this assessment is, as a whole, is going to impact the learner in the new NEP program that rolls out very shortly. There are very many aspects of assessment, starting with small children to grade 12 children, that we have discussed. for all your wonderful inputs into this. Thank you once again, and wish you all the very best. Stay safe.
Thank you so much, esteemed panelists. I think it was some very intense discussion, so I did not disturb Mr. Umashankar with any of the questions. I think it's covered the entire gamut of assessments very well. Thank you so much for accepting our invitation in spite of your busy schedule and being part of this. A heartfelt thanks and gratitude. We wish you the very best in all your endeavors, and we seek your continued support for TechBharat. Thank you so much. Have a good day.